expect when they first had a report of something happening to their child? Kind of the next steps would be you would come into the picture, but what can they expect? Where do they go? What's kind of the layout? What can the family expect? What can the children expect? What happens?
So there are certain mandatory reporters, school teachers, administrators, counselors, police officers, whatnot, that are mandatory to report this. So what normally happens is that the parent, usually the mother, sometimes the dad, will start noticing something off with the child. And then if they're young children, sometimes they'll act out some sexual acts, some masturbation issues, and they're young. And that's a great indicator that something's going on with them. And, if they're 6 or 7 years old and that's what's going on, then that might be an indicator that your child's been abused and that those sexual acts have started that seeking those activities for self-pleasure and those type of things. A lot of times they'll have issues with their perpetrator. So if it's a parent, which is common, it will be hard for the child to disclose to the other parent about that. If it's a caretaker or family member, there might be some reluctance to report it by the victim child. And so those are things to kind of look for. If there are increased concerns, then I would look for help. Maybe discuss with your child, not too deeply, because they may, like I said, it's usually the family member that's perpetrating, and so they're scared to tell anybody else about it. Sometimes,
in your case, the majority of what you've seen has been family doing
family, friends. It's rare that you will have a stranger that will, if a stranger is going to come take your kid. So here's some of the statistics. Usually that child's within a mile of the place they're taken from. And they're hidden. And why that becomes a statistic is because usually it's people, the perpetrators, the sex offenders in the community that will hang around parks or schools, or if they have an opportunity and they see kids, they may stop and try and abduct one of them. But once they abduct the child, they know that they're going to prison. So that's when you have missing kids that are later found deceased or never found for real. So I just think that anymore, I mean, when I was a kid, we went out, played in the streets all the time and whatnot. But I think now, where kids can be the perpetrator as well on other kids, it's almost more important for parents to pay attention to who their kids' friends are, and anything that might stand out and be odd to them. Just protect your kids. So, yeah, no, it's rare that it's a stranger abduction or a stranger that molests your kids. I mean, there's those. There's people that will go in the bathroom behind your kid and try and touch them and molest them. There are those that will try to touch them while you're walking in Walmart or whatever store you're in. Usually that's a pretty bold move, and especially if it's a stranger. So they're dangerous when they get to that point.
So scary. Thank you for giving us some insight into maybe what parents can expect and some of the warning
Oh.
signs with their kids.
And then I can run through what happens. So.
Well, and I'd like you to go into kind of just the process, because out here in Utah, and I don't know if it's like that statewide, I don't know what the protocol is, but you're dealing with your first kid. I mean, where does the interviews with these kids take place? What transpires next with these parents? What resources are available?
Yeah. So it has to be reported somehow. So either the parents report it, or the school counselor reports it, or somebody discloses that your child is a victim. And so DCFS, the Division of Family Services, or Child and Family Services, will notify you.
Right.
The next step after that is to verify the abuse through what is called a forensic interview. And so the forensic interviews are usually done at the Children's Justice Center, or something to the sort of that. Other states might have something else, or call it something else. Usually it's requested that a SANE nurse, a sexual assault nurse, does an exam on the child to see if there's any physical injuries or any evidence of penetration or anything like that, if it's a female. So the first interview is either done by, a lot of times it's done by DCFS social workers. In the jurisdiction that I worked, the police officers could do it too, and were trained. So in the whole idea behind that was to give the child a choice between the social worker and the police officer. And so most of the times they chose the police officer, which was interesting. But so it's all on video. Parents are asked to stay out of the interview. And the reason why is because sometimes you don't know who the perpetrator is, and sometimes that perpetrator, if in the room, would keep the child from giving a complete or an accurate disclosure. So parents are, during the interview process, parents are in a different room, and they're talked to about resources provided by DCFS, by the state, or counseling for youth, or that kind of thing. And then once that interview is conducted, the whole purpose is to first listen to the child, and then to determine if there are actual suspects in the case. So children will be, an example of forensic interviewing is we can't directly question a child under a certain age. For example, did Uncle Johnny touch you on your pee-pee, is too direct. So that question would be, so as a police officer, I work with kids all the time about being safe. And one of those things that I talk about is body safety. And body safety is that nobody but your mom, and with your mom's permission or your dad's permission, a doctor can touch where your swimming suit covers. And then you pose the question like this. You would say, have you ever felt unsafe before where your swimming suit is? And so they, instead of planting something in their mind about somebody, you just ask them that way, kind of ask a question where they will, if that's happened to them. Kids are so honest, they'll say, yeah, well, there was one time Uncle Johnny touched me on my privates. And so I can't say, whatever. I can't be more direct. I just say, tell me more about that. Tell me all about that. And so these are the ways that we interview kids. We cannot plant anything in their minds. And so that's the same thing with parents. I wouldn't, is it your dad, or is it Johnny, or is it, I would lead that to the forensic interview to try and identify who the suspect is or suspects in the. So that's going to be your experience at the Children's Justice Center or wherever the CJC or the DCFS does their interviews.
Okay. Kind of walked us through what it was like for a parent or a caregiver, whoever's involved with this child for their benefit, what it's like to go through the process. You've got the interview process, which is done down at the Children's Justice Center here in Utah, and there could be similar agencies or places in other states that follow the same protocol and process.
Yes, and sometimes they do, if the child is older, so usually 14 years old or older, they sometimes do the interview at the school.
Okay.
And parents should be notified of that, unless they're older. But at some point should be notified by law enforcement about the interview and the allegation. But so prior to the interview, and maybe we should have discussed this earlier, so somebody has to report it, right? Either the parent or a teacher or somebody. If it is reported to DCFS, then they generate a report, not based on anything other than somebody reporting it. And the police get what is called a CANR, which is a child and neglect report. And so once the police get that, then they will try and coordinate usually with DCFS to get these interviews done. If it's reported to the police, then the police will notify DCFS and get them involved as well in order to get the services that are involved through DCFS for the children and the family. So.
Okay. Oh, sounds must be. I can't even imagine what type of job could be involved as a law enforcement officer, as a detective, handling cases with these sweet children. So I kind of wanted to just kind of touch a little bit on, well, law enforcement officers, what you as detectives go through when handling these cases with these children, because we're able to kind of, I see the picture through the investigation part, what's happening to the child, and it's horrifying and heartbreaking. But what is the detective experience? What did you experience as you were going through these interviews?
Oh, for sure. I have my own kids, and there's a certain point where you believe the children, and when you realize that people, adults, are so selfish that they pleasure themselves off of innocence, and in fact, innocence is what they find attractive. I can't think of anything more evil in my life than that. So to have people, like I said, use children and their innocence for their own personal pleasures, that's hard to deal with, And at some point you're like, man, this guy or this woman shouldn't be allowed to be anywhere around this kid anymore. But that's up to the courts, But you get pretty jaded and you start thinking that, wow, there's people that are just flat out evil in this world, and they use the innocence of these children for themselves, and it's just not right. It's just not right.
What age ranges did you see in your 5 years in child crimes?
So I did child crimes right from the beginning. But specifically child crimes was only 5 years. So I've seen babies that are victims of sex abuse all the way up till 17 years old, and the older kids usually come forward themselves and will disclose things later on, about what happened to them as kids or it's just hard to manipulate a teenager into that kind of stuff. So, but the younger children are easily manipulated, you know.
What percentage would you say of these children had the abuse done to them by a parent?
Oh, you know, there's some stats out there that generalize sex abuse, and it's 1 in 3 females have been abused somewhere in their young life, you know, before they turn into teenagers or into adults. So I could see that as a pretty accurate statistic, but I would say that, like I said, it's hard for others to get a hold of a child. You know, under 6 years old, parents are usually it's either parents or siblings that are abusing them. So
The majority of what you've seen has been parents or siblings up to age 6?
Up to 6, 7. Just because it's harder, parents don't really let their kids stay at other people's houses. And if they do, it's family members. So it's kind of, that's usually where you see the abuse coming from. So.
Wow. What advice do you have for parents with children? I mean, because you have families, and you have blended families of all sorts.
Yep.
You know, people trust people in their lives, generally speaking. You trust your friends, you trust your uncle, you trust your brother, you trust your brother-in-law, your sister-in-law, whatever the case may be. What advice do you have for parents if this is really, happening within, a family's own unity? What advice do you have for these parents that haven't experienced this? What can they look for? What should they be watching?
Well, you know your kids better than anybody else. And so look for anything that starts putting up that red flag. And you may say to yourself, oh, that's my brother, my brother-in-law, whatever. He would never do something like that. Trust your gut and try to verify what's going on. It's harder with young kids. Young kids don't even know sometimes that they're being abused, and don't even understand what that abuse entails. So my best advice to you is know your kids and protect your kids. So be careful about who you leave your kids with. And if there's anything, it's too late once it's done. But if anything, just trust your gut.
What type of red flags would a parent or caregiver see in a potential perpetrator?
So if there's like over desire to be alone with your child, they're just looking for opportunities to abuse you. Not always, I can't say that, but a perpetrator would be looking for opportunities. The only stranger stuff is, not even stranger, it's just kids that are babysitters and that have access to your kids. So, of course, teachers have access to your kids, of course, babysitters, family members. Just think of who has access to your kids, and then is there anything that they're doing that's going to set off a red flag? And I could number things off and go through those things, but you'll know as a parent that something's not right. Something's not right with your daughter. Something's not right with your son. What is it? And just pay attention to them. They'll let you know, sometimes not verbally, but they'll let you know when they're uncomfortable around somebody. And then just listen to that.
So pay attention to your kids, pay attention to I would say just kind of what they're giving off, follow your gut, you're saying, and really just keeping an open eye for anybody that has really the push or the desire to want to be alone with your child, or that would create an environment where they could possibly be alone with your child. Not necessarily speaking that every individual is like that, but Follier got through that process, is what you're saying.
Yeah, you know, and it could be right in front of you. You don't even realize it. I had a case with a grandpa who was inappropriately touching his grandkids in front of his kids, just as he was holding the child, you know. Just put his fingers where they shouldn't be, and to him it was a turn on, but for the family they didn't even see it.
How old was this child?
So about 4.
How did it get exposed? Like, what transpired from that?
Yeah, the mom actually had a feeling that something was going on, and then lucky for me, the grandpa actually just disclosed that that's what he did.
Wow. Thank you for giving the community some insight into some of the warning signs, some of the red flags that you could see not only in the child, but the perpetrator, and even just following your own guts is huge. I think oftentimes people will overlook their own instincts